Okay, I think it's about time to get started, as much as I love Billy Joel. Again, I'm Brian with SMMware, and today we're going to be walking through the features of SMMware. Here is a path that we're going to take through the features. We have 4 separate lines that we're going to follow. I'm going to start here with the items in blue, clients and sales leads, looking at jobs, entering of hours and expenses, creating invoices, file sharing. Then we have organizations and contacts in green. The section in yellow is about calendars, task notes, and calls. We'll talk about SMMware on mobile devices, and finally we'll talk about our integrations. Again, we're going to start with the path in blue, starting with our clients. Here we are in SMMware on the home page. Going to go to the clients section. Here we're looking at the listing. We have a filter section where you can limit the listing if you need to. I'm going to go ahead and add a new client. You can see here that we collect a lot of the usual information, first name, last name, and so on. And we also have some additional fields that I'll point out. Instead of having just one field for who referred the business to you, we actually have 3. And the topmost one is meant to be the most broad. So this could be something like real estate, and then the company would be Smith Realty, and then the person would be, Jane Doe who's an agent at that company. We also have a field for tracking whether someone's willing to act as a reference for you. And when you're first creating the client, of course, that is too soon, but later on, you can change it to yes or no as applicable. And we have a client representative field. If you're working with an estate situation, you might have a lawyer in the system already, and they would appear in this list. If you are working with a family member, chances are they are not already in the system. Okay. So they won't already be in the system. You can use the plus sign and add them from here. And the next field over tells you what kind of relationship that is, whether it's an attorney, adult, child, so on. And then down below that, we have some custom fields. What we have are text fields with the labels that you can set in our settings editor, and they can be whatever you like. The client custom fields should probably be related to the client as a person. So something like mobility issues would be appropriate. So this person uses a wheelchair, this person uses a walker, things like that. We also have custom fields under our job profiles, and the custom fields there are typically going to be about a specific location, like an elevator code or which day the garbage comes, things like that. We'll talk about jobs a little bit more later. Within SMMware, if you have a list of addresses that you work with on a regular basis, like senior living centers, you can have them appear in this drop-down list so that you can simply pick them and have the address filled out for you for the most part. And then you just have to add in the apartment number, something like that. Within SMMware, the client profiles represent obviously your ongoing clients and past clients, but a profile or client profile is also used for potential clients. When you create a sales lead, you will pick one of your client profiles and create a sales lead. You can pick what kind of work you think is going to be done, and this list can be customized. And you can pick what stage of the sales process you are in. The inquiry stage is envisioned as someone calling you with just a casual question and probably not much intention of doing something right here, right now. They're just kind of getting their feet wet. And so somebody that you're working with right now might be in progress. After you give them a quote, it might be submitted. And then from there, you might win or lose the work. This list of status levels is also customizable. We can put in who the sales lead is. The custom fields here are shared by the job profiles. And if you think about it, a sales lead and a job are kind of 2 sides of the same coin before you win the work and after you win the work. So the fields are the same. And we can also put in their address here using the drop down. or just type it in if you don't have a specific common address that you're working with. So we'll go ahead and save this. Once we have a sales profile, well, I should explain. A sales profile is where you store information about this opportunity that is separate from the actual quote. So a quote is the document you give to the client. It says what you're going to do for them and how much it's going to cost. But you might also be collecting other information along the way that is not part of the quote. And again, we can have things like these custom fields that we want to record about the mover's name, the realtor's name, elevator code, things like that. We might want to upload some photos that we took of the client's home. So here's a file manager. It's found in various places within SMMware under the client job and sales leads. And using that is simply a question of first picking your photos. Let's go to here. And I will point out that these photos have long random file names. They were downloaded directly from a phone onto this hard drive. SMMware has a button here called Auto Rename, which in combination with this dropdown of tags can form up a name for your photos that is more readable. So instead of having those long random file names that we saw before, we can have them renamed as a combination of these two. So let's say I go into the bedroom, take some photos, and then I use the auto rename. The photos are going to wind up being called bedroom 1, 001, 002, 003, and so on. So after I've picked my photos and assigned the tag, I can go ahead and upload those. And there they are. And you can see that the names are exactly as I described, bedroom 1, 001 through 005. You can enter a note into the system. A more common use for the note is to write something about where the furniture would go, something like that. And you can also download the photos again if you need to. You can share the photos within SMMware. Since it already knows who the client is and their email address, you don't have to cut and paste in information like their email address. You simply tell SMMware that, yes, you want to share it with the client. And if you want to share it with a moving company or other, like a client representative, then you can pick them from here. And if I was to hit save, emails would go out to them saying that you now have a file that you can look at. That is our file manager. Let's go ahead and take a look at what it's like to create an actual quote. Starting with the new quote button, brings up this window. And within SMMware, the question of creating a quote is one of working with the blocks that we provide for you and mixing and matching them however you see fit. And we provide clients a client block, various other blocks. I'll start with the client block, and it's going to bring in some information about the client. We have header blocks where the text is large and bold. And then you start to have, say, a labor block where you can start putting in more details. And after you've been working with the system for a little while, you'll probably create some templates to save yourself some time. You could have templates like small job, large job, or medium job. You can have downsizing jobs and whatever you see fit. And each one of those, again, is however you want to customize those blocks. In this case, I've got a few templates in the system, and I'm going to pick the 3-level quote, which is called the 3-level quote because it's dividing the items into major sections: pre-move, move day, post-move. And then from there, we divide it down into bedroom. And from there, we have line items. And the labels that you see here and how they're structured are completely customizable. This doesn't have to be pre-move. This block is not dedicated to being about bedrooms. It's whatever you label it. Okay, so when we are satisfied with our quote, well, I should explain there's a few more blocks to talk about. We can have some text blocks. We have a summary block that looks at all the line items entered above. And we have a legal block that's pulled out of the configuration editor. And while these blocks are preset for you, you can still modify them as you see fit. So the text that you were given by default is just to get you started. I'm going to go ahead and save this. And I can view this as a PDF so that I'll see what the client's going to get. And of course, your images will be, the image here will be customized to you. And you can see that the quote looks much like the web version. When it's popped up as a PDF, if you want to download it to your desktop as a PDF, you can do so from there. And from here, if you want to, you can email that same PDF to the client using this email button. And we can copy that. Sometimes you give somebody a quote and they write back and say, well, we want to make some changes, and now we need a second version. So you say, all right, I'm going to copy this to a version 2. And when you do that, you might want to write yourself a note. This field right here is not part of what the client's going to see. You notice that it's marked as private. And we can say something like, this version is the same as the first. That way, 3 or 4 months from now, when you come back and look at this and you see there's a couple of quotes, you'll have a shortcut to understanding what the history was there by looking at these notes. So I'm going to go ahead and close out our quote. Now we're back to our sales lead. And I'm going to look at our listing of sales leads. And what we have here is essentially a sales report. It'll pop up in this section, and we can see all the different status levels that we're assigning to the different sales leads. And again, these are configurable. And we're showing you the percentages based on value, hours, and quantity. You can also use the filtering section up here. So if you want to answer a question regarding the 3rd quarter of last year or the 1st quarter of this year, then you can use that to fine-tune what the sales report is telling you. So down below is the listing of the sales leads. From here, I'd like to talk about jobs. Go to the jobs section in our main menu, looking at our listing of jobs. And we'll go ahead and edit one of these. And again, I'd like to touch base on the structure within SMMware. We have the client profile, which is containing information about the client as a person. Here's their name and their phone number. These are things you don't want to duplicate in the system. You don't want to have their phone number in 2 places or their email address in 2 places. And then from there, we have a sales lead for when you have to work with them about what the scope and the costs will be. And then once you win the work, then you create a job. All right, and from here, we have the same custom fields that we saw in the sales lead. And we have the moving information. This would be pulled in. If I created this from a quote, that would have been pulled in. And let's see, from here we will, so I should touch on the idea that the job is it's like a bucket where you put all the items about this particular scope of work. And a job normally corresponds to a contract that you sign with the client. So this is not an event where you're going to someone's home for the day. This is a job, and SMMware matches that entire contract. And we'll talk about events more when we touch on the calendars. Let's go ahead and look at what it's like to enter your hours. Went to Associates and record my hours. Because I'm an administrator, I can pick who I'm managing. It doesn't have to just be me. This top section is where I can create new entries. And the bottom section is where I can view the existing entries and edit and delete them as needed. Go ahead and create a new entry. Say it's on the 22nd. For the description, I can type in whatever I like, or I can pick from one of the predefined descriptions, and that list is also customizable. If I was working in one place in the morning and another in the afternoon, then I could add another row and handle that all in one operation. Working with expenses is much the same situation. In this case, we have these radio buttons. If you spent money out of the company's credit card, you leave this radio button set to company. If you spent money out of pocket and need to be reimbursed, then you would mark it as a reimbursable expense. Here's where we pick the vendor. And of course, we have to enter the amount. We'll also want a date, and we want to know which job it was part of. And we also want to enter description. Also upload a receipt if you have one. And like for the hours, you can make multiple entries in one time. Sometimes on a job, you will charge the client a flat fee for administrative time back at the home office, something like that. And you can predefine your flat fees to be a combination of the description and the actual dollar amount. So when I pick from the preset list, it fills in the description box and the fees for me. And again, the top section is where you can create new entries, and the bottom section is where you can view the existing ones. From here, we'll go ahead and take a look at the invoices. Here is our listing of invoices, and we can create a new one from here. I'll go ahead and look at a pre-existing one, just because I know that it'll be populated. When you first create an invoice, I'm just going to roll this back in status level. So when you first create an invoice, you'll assign it to a date range. So if you can imagine that you have a job that lasts, say, 4 or 5 months, and you need to send out multiple invoices, maybe one per month, then you need a way of indicating the date range. And that's what these fields will do for you. We also have a note that the client will see, and one that is only for company use. The client will not see that. When you first create the invoice, you can scan for the line items that apply within that date range and for that job, and they'll be pulled into the invoice. And you can edit the descriptions. Sometimes the associates are not as clear as they could be, or maybe they use shorthand that's common within the company, but the client won't understand. So you can clean that up right here, all in one go, instead of having to do so line item by line item. The addresses here are pulled from the client's profile, because you don't always know, or it's not an automatic thing that you'll be sending the invoice to the old address or the new address. You kind of have to be able to pick that one at the time. And that will be pre-filled in for you. And let's see, from here we can go ahead and save that. And the status levels. When you first create the invoice, the preliminary status level is meant to tell other people in the company that this is nowhere near ready to send out to the client. It's really more of a scratch pad. And then the finalized status level is appropriate when you are ready for it to be approved. SMMware includes the idea of team leads approving the invoices, since they're the ones who were on site and they know which employees were there and they know what work was done. So that puts them in a good position to say that everything looks okay. So you would mark it as finalized, and then the team lead on their homepage would see that they have an invoice to approve. They would approve it, and afterwards it becomes team lead approved. Since I'm an administrator, I can just go ahead and approve it myself. After it's been approved, instead of having the button about scanning, now we have these buttons for the PDFs. When you look at the web page version, you can think of that as the quote-unquote true version of the invoice, because it has every last detail that goes into it. But from there, we have 3 different ways that you can present that information to your client. The simplest one is the summary format, which is as simple as it gets. It just has a line item for the major categories like labor and expenses. It does not break anything down on a day-by-day basis. From there, we have the detailed version, and that one looks pretty much like the web view that you saw before. So if you have multiple employees on a given day, they will each have their own line item. The detailed version can get a bit overly long if the job is long. So we also offer what's called a roll-up version. And in this version, we have only a single line item per day. And if there was more than one employee on that day, it just tells you how many there were and what the grand totals for the hours and the subtotals were. So again, that's probably most appropriate when you have a longer job. And that brings us to the end of our first track. We've talked about clients, sales leads with quotes, talked about jobs, entering the hours, the expenses, flat fees, creating invoices, and we also touched on the file management. Next, we're going to talk about organizations and contacts. In the main menu, we've got the organizations and contacts section. Within SMMware, the organization is a company that you deal with, like a real estate company. And the contact is perhaps an agent who works at the real estate company. When we go to look at the organizations, first we see a listing broken down into categories. So if you want to see your real estate agents that you know, or the real estate companies that you know, agencies, then you can come here and pop that open to look at those. And let's go ahead and look at one of those. When you have an organization, you want to mark if they are a vendor that you spend money with, which you do with this checkbox. Here's where you assign them to categories. The list of categories is also completely customizable. And of course, we collect their name, their address, and their phone number, their website, and so on. Also, I would point out that you can upload files for an organization. So for instance, if a senior living center gives you a PDF with all the standard floor plans, you can upload it here, and then that is a logical place where everybody knows to go to find that kind of information. We're going to be talking about the tasks, notes, and calls more a little bit later, but I wanted to point out that here under the organization, you can create tasks and write notes as well. And we can also, if there was a contact set for this organization, they would appear here. I'll go ahead and create one. And we'll just go ahead and save that. You can see that it pulled in the address of the parent organization, although you can override that. And there's also checkboxes here where you can mark if someone acts as a client representative, which might be appropriate if this was an attorney. If this is someone who sends business to you, you'll want to check mark that. And in combination with this date of last contact, that drives some other functionality within SMMware. We'll say that we talked to them on September 1st. Also, SMMware has various shortcuts to help you get around. You don't always have to go up to the main menu. Here, I'm going to click on the View Org button so I can go back to the parent organization for this contact. And now that we have a contact in the system for them, they appear here, and you can jump back to them using the Edit button. The contacts and organizations is one of our shorter tracks within our webinar today. So we're ready to move on. We're going to talk about the calendaring. We're going to talk about task, notes, and calls next. For that, I'm going to go to a job. And we're going to look at tasks. So here's a list of tasks that are already in the system. And you can edit and delete them from here. Let's go ahead and create a new task. We'll give it a due date. Let's say it's going to be October 1st. I can set a couple of reminder emails and a priority. I can assign it to someone. I can write a summary and a description, or a full description. Save that. Go back to our listing. As you work with the task section over multiple jobs, eventually you will probably have the same kind of tasks repeatedly, and you will ask yourself if you can create tasks more efficiently. SMMware offers you what are called task groups. Here we have some that are predefined here. Each one of these is a combination of multiple tasks. So we're going to say pre-sale consultation, and you can see that there are 1, 2, 3 tasks in the group. And this is efficient and safer in that you are presented with a list of all the tasks that are typical, and then you can get rid of the ones that you don't need. So instead of trying to remember them all and possibly forgetting, instead it's a question of getting rid of the ones you don't need. So we're going to get rid of this one in the middle. And you can see that a lot of the information is already filled out for us. There's a default summary and a default description, and I can always override that as needed. And it can be default, or it can default to being assigned to a particular person. That's also in the configuration. We can also use this task, full tasks button. So it's to see the entire text of all the tasks all in a row. So that's useful for reviewing the history in mass. So now we can move on to the section about notes. And here we can create a new note. These are simpler than tasks. They simply have a summary field and the full description without assigning it to somebody. In this case, we have some predefined text appearing here that is intended to guide the user for what kind of information we want them to collect, but this is also completely configurable. Fill out the rest of it as needed. And back on the listing page, you can see who created the note and when they created it. So this gives you a history of what's happened over the course of this job. We also have our calls section where you can either record a call that's already come in randomly. You can just put in a date. Maybe this call came in earlier this morning and I'm just recording it now. Or you can plan for a future call, in which case you would probably set a reminder, and you would probably want to be more careful about setting the call direction, whether you're calling them or they're calling you. And again, have a summary. We have a status. So that's the calls section. We're going to go to the home page now. And we have some sections that, as an administrator, I can see, but these are called the status board. One is for our operations or ongoing jobs. One is for sales. And these are intended to give you the 30,000-foot view of how things are going across the entire company. These keys are also configurable. So we've got currently the green good tag. We've got the yellow flag and the red alert button. But you can have whatever you want. More labels, fewer labels, other colors, other number of labels. Here's our sales. And it's currently defined using hot leads, medium leads, cold leads. But again, you can also configure that for, say, the steps of your process. So consulting, writing the estimate, waiting on a response, so on. So tying back into our tasks, this is a section that has all the tasks in the system that are assigned to me. Whether I created them or someone else created it and assigned it to me, it will appear here. And if one is late, it would be in red, so as to draw attention to it. If I create a task and assign them to someone else, they would appear here. And here's a couple that are now late. As an administrator, I can see this section, and it goes across the entire company and shows me what is going on. So hopefully when you come to this section, there's not very much red. And they disappear from this section when they are finished. So hopefully it's not too long. That means you're falling behind. When a task is completed, then for the next 5 days, it will appear here so that you can easily verify for yourself that something was done. And there's a section similar for my calls. If I'm acting as a team lead on a particular job and it's ready, or there are invoices ready for approval, they would appear in this list right here. If you are using the optional hourly approval feature within SMMware, as the team lead, I might have to approve some hours that were entered by employees, which I would do from here. And as the employee, if the team lead rejected my entry, it would appear here so I could edit it and resubmit it to the system, and then it would go to the team lead again. The next two sections are for just for you to look over and get a sense of how much is on your plate. One section is for the jobs where you are the team lead, and the other section is for you as a team member. Going back to our contacts, we mentioned that some of them might refer business to you. And so those are your referring contacts. And for the ones where it's been the longest since you've spoken to them, they will appear here. And the idea is that you will work through this list. You contact them, you update the date of last contact, and hopefully all these dates would be relatively recent. The idea here is that you want to prevent a situation where you haven't spoken to them for a while, and maybe they're mad about something, they stop sending you business, and then eventually they get mad because you haven't noticed. So this helps you prevent that. The next two sections about clients acting as reference. This is for someone who's going to go in on a sales call and you want to have a list of 10 people who are willing to act as a reference. This is a section where the job is over, but you have not yet asked them to be a reference. So their status says unasked. So you can talk to them and put a setting in place for whether they're willing to act as a reference. And that keeps the first list up to date. This section is actually a new section, and people who are using invites for their events, they do get an email where the invitees can say that they want to work on the event or not, but sometimes those emails get lost. So this new section allows them to come here and say that they want to request being part of an event or not. And they can update their status up until the job is assigned or the event is assigned. Which brings us down to the bottom of the page and our calendar. This is the homepage calendar, which is going to show you events that you are personally involved in, either as the main contact or as an attendee. So this is not every event across the entire company. The tags at the bottom have a color key that might tell you something about what kind of work is going to be done or something else about the event. Right now, this is set up with green for jobs, sales is browned, and we'll touch on the tags a little bit more when we go to the master calendar. So just as the homepage calendar is not going to be every event in the company, we have the master calendar, which does exactly that. Going back to our tags, the other ways, we see three different ways that are commonly employed for the tags. The simplest approach is to have a tag for jobs and a tag for sales. But you can take the job tag and break it up based on the kind of work being done, like packing or unpacking. Another way that we've seen it handled is to color code these events based on who the team lead is. So we've got Judy, Carmen, and Margot as our team leads, and they each have, one or two events up here. Let's go ahead and look at what it's like to create an event. We're going to assign this event tag as a job. It's associated with a job. And we're going to indicate which job for description. The button I just pressed is called Insert New Address, and that will turn into a link to a mapping function once we save it and go back to the main calendar. I'm going to go ahead and skip notifications so as not to send out text messages and email messages unnecessarily. You can see that these two people are already working on a different event at this time frame. So this is the availability-based approach. the employees will enter the time that they cannot work, and then that is pulled into this screen. I'll go ahead and assign a couple of people. I'm going to adjust the times that they are starting and ending. And this is our fanciest approach to handling the attendees, because it does allow for them to enter or start and finish on the event at different times. The event is considered to start when the first person, I'm just going to adjust this to make my point a little bit better. So the event is considered to start when the first person walks in the door, and it is considered to end when the last person walks out the door, and that's reflected up at the top in the times. So when we're using availability, we're not going to directly set the date and the times. It's pulled from down below. We can also put reminders in. And we can mark an event as tentative, which gives it a red outline back in the main view. As I mentioned, the notifications can go out for events as text notifications and as emails. So I'll go ahead and save this. We also have this particular SMMware site integrated with Google Calendar. And the events that we enter here show up on Google Calendar. The idea is that you would still do all your planning in SMMware, but you can refer to the Google Calendar as you need, which is convenient for some folks. But again, all the planning is done on SMMware because that is where all the information about clients and addresses and the employee availability, that's where all that's stored. So Google just doesn't have that information. Okay, let's go back and look at so we have this on the 23rd. So here's the event that we just created. And I can click on that to get a pop-up with more information. And the description that we entered in is here. You'll notice that the address also appears, but it has a link after it marked map. When I click on that, it will open up a mapping function, and this works on your mobile devices as well. And what we're basically doing is handing you off from SMMware to the mapping function, and then it will give you all the GPS turn-by-turn assistance. I'll go ahead and close this tab and go back to the SMMware tab. I'm going to show you where employees can enter their availability. In this case, it's set up to choose unavailability. Since I'm an administrator, I can manage the unavailability for anybody. When you want to create, I'll just go on to the next week so as to start with a blank slate. So when I want to create an entry, I just click and hold and then drag down, and then I release when I'm done, and that creates an entry. I can grab that entry and move it if I accidentally put it on the wrong day. These little white tick marks at the bottom, I can grab those and stretch it. Or if I just made a mistake and don't need this entry at all, I can click on it somewhere in the middle and get rid of it. So the information here is pulled into the calendar for planning purposes. And I can see a summary of when people are available using this checkbox called Include Availability, and then I can filter for it. And that adds this new row, which has information about who can do work when. And if somebody is busy, so for instance, Carly is already on that event and they don't get off until 3, so they're only available from 3 to 8. SMMware also has a setting for how much time you think someone needs to have for it to be useful. So if somebody has 15 minutes free, then that's not really very helpful. So if SMMware has a setting where you can say that they need to have 1 hour or 3 hours or 4 hours or something like that. This might be a good time to touch on the settings editor. So under the admin section, we have the settings editor. Go to admin and settings. And here is where you can make all your various configurations within SMMware. There's quite a few things that you can do to customize SMMware, and they're controlled from here. The calendar section has these various settings. Here's where our tags are defined. And you can give them labels, the text color, the background color, and you can tie them to jobs, you can tie them to the sales leads, so that when you're looking at the drop downs, that they don't get too long, or they don't mix up jobs and sales. So that's our settings editor. I'm going to turn off the availability summaries here. And I'm going to touch on the other kinds of approaches we have for managing attendees. I'm going to come down to the attendee management dropdown. I'm going to change it from availability to direct, which is one of our other approaches. And this approach assumes that you've already spoken about who's going to work on the event, whether that's in a company meeting or on the drive home, whatever. In this case, you don't need SMMware to help you decide who's going to do what. You simply need SMMware to record that and formalize the information. So this is an assignment situation. They're going to get an email saying you are now assigned to this event. I can designate who the main contact is. When they get their email or text notification, it's going to say that if they have questions, they should talk to Marion. So I'll go ahead and save that. I'll start one more event. Let's go over here to the 5th. I'm going to tie this to a sales lead. And I'm going to change this to the invite-based approach. And when you are working with invites, it's not like when you're holding a party at your home where you might invite 8 or 9 people and then 6 or 7 show up and that's all fine. In this case, we want a team of 3 people, and we would not want to have only 2 people show up. We wouldn't want to have 4 people show up. We want 3, so we're going to say that in the system. And we are going to set a date for when people have to respond to their invite by. We can't expect people to respond within 15 minutes, but we also don't want them to respond like 10 minutes before the event starts. So this gives people some sort of guideline by when they're expected to say something. And we're going to designate who gets the invites. And there's a couple different approaches to using the invite attendee management. You can do first come, first serve. So if I invite 6 or 7 people, and I only have a team size of 3, anybody after the first 3 will get notified that, sorry, the team is full. Another approach is to use a larger number for the team size. The team size is not included in the email, so you don't have to worry about people asking why it's going to take so many people. But by having a high number, nobody gets turned away. So they get their invite, they can respond that they want to attend or not. And then you would come back here and you would assign your final team. So you can use that to invite 5 people, and then you pick, let's say that 4 people want to do it, and then you pick the 3 that are your final team. You can also use this for multiple rounds of invitations. If you want 3 people, you can invite the 3 that you would prefer. And then if one of them can't make it, you come back here and you add a 4th one. And when you save it, that 4th person will get their invite. So you can do multiple rounds of invitations. And that brings us to the end of the section on calendars. Let's see about showing you this on a mobile device. I have a phone here. I'm going to have it share its screen with the computer. I'll just take a moment. All right, so here we are looking at an actual telephone. And I have a shortcut here that takes you to SMMware. On a phone, SMMware is not a native app that you download from the App Store or Google Play. It is still a website, but we create these shortcuts, and then it allows you to treat SMMware just like an app. I'm going to go ahead and click on the screen on the icon, and it's going to take me directly into SMMware. And here's what the home page looks like. Here's what the calendar looks like. You can tap on the events, and I can, let's see if this one has a map. Yes, it does. So here we have a map link. I'll go ahead and click on that, or touch on it, really. It's now opening up the mapping app. And from here, I could just have it guide me the rest of the way. And in SMMware, if you want to enter your hours, which is another common task for employees, come to the screen, pick the date and the job. These predefined descriptions are particularly useful on a phone. And that's all there is to it, creating an hours entry. So from here, I'm going to talk about the integrations that SMMware has. Go ahead and stop the phone sharing. SMMware integrates with Google Calendar, which we mentioned before. We also integrate with MailChimp and with QuickBooks, both the online and the desktop versions. Talk a little bit about MailChimp now. Within SMMware, you can, or once you set up the integration with MailChimp, we're looking at the client listing, and SMMware will attach tags to the client, which appear in MailChimp. So they're marked as current client, past client. Somebody can be both a current client and a past client at the same time. So you did a job for them 2 years ago, so that counts as a past client, and then you're doing work for them now. That makes them a current client. So these clients are all marked, and they can you can use MailChimp to narrow down the list of recipients. So that way you can say, well, I just want to send emails to past clients, or I just want to send email to current clients, something like that. Another audience within MailChimp is the contacts. Within SMMware, we assigned our categories to our contacts. So for instance, real estate agents and plumbers and so on. And once SMMware copies them to MailChimp, those tags or those categories become tags, and you can see them here. So real estate agent, accounting. We have some special tags that don't correlate to the categories. If they refer business to you, that becomes a tag for them. And that way you can narrow down your list of recipients using those tags. So if you want to send out an email strictly to real estate agents, you can do so. Or if you want to send them strictly to senior living center people, then that works as well. Another function that MailChimp offers that is very useful are the automations. These are called customer journeys. And you can use these are a sequence of emails separated by time typically. For Karen, you can create the shortcut on the desktop. Let me jump back here for a second. So if you go to the Associates section and the training documents, there is a shortcut here, a YouTube video, that will tell you how to create a desktop shortcut for Apple devices, the iOS devices. And that's only like about 3 minutes long, but it's very helpful to see it done. And there's another video here for the Androids. There's different sections of this video for the different kind of browsers you're using on Android. But that is the easiest way to get your desktop shortcuts. Thank you. Going back to our customer journeys, again, they are a sequence of emails separated by time. And some of the ways you can use this is if you go to a in-person seminar that you give at say a senior living center, and you walk away with a series of emails, you can send them follow-up over time. So a week later, you can send them a thank you for attending our seminar, or maybe that's a day later. And then a week later, you can send them a couple of or follow-up email, and 2 weeks after that. Let's see, let's take a look at, here's thanks for attending our seminar. So we're going to view what that looks like. It's pretty easy to work with these customer journeys. So the tag for this one is when you create when you create a contact and you're labeling them as a sales lead, that is adding a tag, and that starts them down this path. And then we've inserted a time delay of 1 week. And then we are sending them an email saying, thank you for attending our seminar. And then these segments can repeat and mix and match however you like. And you can use these kinds of email sequences for follow-up after a seminar like that. You can also use them for a current client so that you can kind of send them an email about your procedures on a regular basis. You can use these for when somebody's job finishes and they are now a past client. And you can say, hey, please take this survey, or thank you for your business. And maybe a month and a half later, you can send them another email saying, hey, if there's any other work that has come up that you'd like us to do, we'd be happy to talk to you about it, things like that. You can have, let's see where we have these here. MailChimp also lets you have surveys. Should have gone to them here, but you have postcards. I started to create a postcard, but I just wanted to show you the ones I have. But MailChimp offers these customer journeys. They offer landing pages and postcards and surveys, all of which you can tie together into your marketing efforts. So that's very useful, and SMMware is very happy to be integrated with them. From here, I thought I'd talk a little bit about the QuickBooks integration as we wrap things up. Within SMMware, oops, I want to go here. When you want to transfer things over to QuickBooks, it's a pretty simple process, but you do have a lot of control over it. And I've got a list of items here that have not yet been copied to QuickBooks. They are all marked with a button that says QBO Add. The ones that have been transferred have a round QB icon. And I can copy them over one at a time if I want to. But the more typical usage is to set a date range, which will typically correlate to a payroll period. And then you filter it, and then you can click on QBO Add All. But I don't want to copy all these all at once, so I'm just going to do one. And it's as simple as that. You tell it to copy, and then it says it successfully copied that item. And just a moment. Gotta get logged in again. All right, now we're in. And we can go down to reporting, and we will look for recent and edited time. And we can see the entries that we've created. So this one was it's actually from last year that I copied over, but it still shows here as having been brought over today. And you can also look at this under the audit log. When items are copied over from SMMware, they are pretty much indistinguishable from items that you would have directly added in QuickBooks. In SMMware, you can copy over these individual hours and expense items. You can copy over clients and associates, you can copy over vendors, and you can copy over invoices. So you can see the QBO add button here for the invoices as well. So that brings us to the end of our tour. I will just close by mentioning that SMMware has a YouTube channel. You can watch various videos about different functionality within SIM. We've got about 30 of them here on different topics. And for anyone who is ready to subscribe, you can go to our corporate site, come to the pricing and sign up page, and you can see the different levels of subscriptions here. The first 30 days are free. There's no setup fee and there's no annual contracts, just month to month. If anybody has any questions that they have either now or later, you can follow up with me. Coming to the SMMware homepage, there's the phone number to call, 240-285-4619. And of course, you can go to the Contact Us page. Thank you very much for joining me here today. I hope everybody felt like this was useful. And I hope you have a good rest of the day. Thank you very much.